Falling Stars by Plate Crowd 5610. Fourth part of Hunting Nemesis. Chapter 4. Healing the Enemy. Summary. Ratchet has his work cut out for him. The moment they rushed through the ground bridge, Ratchet's processor was already running through 100 different procedures. They had to move quickly. Starscream's energon levels were dropping rapidly, and the mech was dangerously close to offlining. Here, on the medical berth, Ratchet gestured towards the metal slab in his med bay and started frantically pulling out supplies from storage. He hadn't had to do an emergency patch-up like this in over a vorn. Ratchet tossed his tools on the medical cart next to the berth and narrowed his optics at Starscream's condition. Most of the energon was being lost through the ring joint. His optics snapped to the human again. "Kid, you need to move now. We need to put him on his side so I can reach his ring." The human was about to protest before seemingly realizing that Ratchet was right. "You can still protect him. You just can't stand there," Ratchet added. The human carefully climbed out of Starscream's chest, standing on the berth next to him. "Optimus, I need you to lift him." The Prime nodded towards Ratchet and reached for the Seeker's shoulder. He lifted Starscream carefully and held him on his side, giving Ratchet access to the joint on his back. The human tensed when Optimus grabbed Starscream. Ratchet ignored the kid and reached for a temporary patch. He would have to deal with the circuit damage and possibly the reattachment of the wing later. Right now, slowing the energon loss is the priority. He transformed the servers into his wheelchair and made quick work of sealing the area over with the patch where the limb had once been attached. "Okay," he nodded to Optimus. "You can put him down now." Optimus gently laid the Seeker back down onto the berth, on top of the new temporary patch. Ratchet turned around to grab more patches, and when he looked back, to no one's surprise, the human was back inside of Starscream's open spark chamber. Ratchet sighed. "Kid, no," the human scowled. "I don't have time for this." "No." Ratchet could practically feel the protective field radiating off the kid. That was strange. He also noticed how the kid kept glancing nervously up at Optimus, who was still standing beside the berth. Ratchet's optics flittered between the two. "Kid, will you actually let me do the job you were just begging me to do if he goes?" He jerked his helmet towards Optimus. The human paused for a second, then looked back at Starscream. Ratchet could easily grab the human and move him out of the way, but Optimus would probably be upset, and Ratchet would also likely not hear the end of the human's whining in response. The human nodded. Ratchet raised an optic ridge expectantly at Optimus, who looked about ready to argue. "Heap heap, you said it yourself, Optimus. Starscream is in no state to cause me harm." Optimus shifted his weight on his stabilizers, seemingly almost unsure. Ratchet rolled his optics. "Fine." He reached down for a button on the medical berth, and restraints wrapped around Starscream's wrists and ankles, securing his limbs in place. "Happy?" He gave Optimus a pointed glare. The human frowned at the restraints, but said nothing. Optimus must have found it satisfactory for Ratchet's safety, because he left him at bay, silently, likely to debrief with the others. At least Ratchet now had one less problem to deal with. Once the Prime was gone, the human very hesitantly climbed out of Starscream's chassis and stood on the medical berth, eyes not leaving the Seeker's frame. Ratchet pulled out his scanner and started waving it over Starscream's frame, looking for more leaks and any more data he could have missed. Ratchet pulled out some additional cables and hooked them up to a spark support machine. He wheeled it over and placed it next to the berth. Preparing to attach a few of them to Starscream's spark and other critical systems, the human stood, watching the mech anxiously. "What can I do?" he asked, his voice tight. Ratchet barely glanced at him. Stay out of the way. This is complicated enough without interference. But I can help, the human pressed, his tone insistent. Help, Ratchet barked, his frustration bubbling over. What do you know about Cybertronian biology? The human's eyes flashed with determination. I work with Knockout in the medbay. I know your Cybertronian biology better than you think. Ratchet paused, narrowing his eyes at the human. You have assisted Knockout? The human nodded. Yeah, and I have helped patch up Starscream more times than I can count. I know what I'm doing. For a moment, Ratchet weighed the options. Maybe he could use an extra pair of servers, and it seemed the human might know more about Starscream systems than Ratchet does, especially if he can't access the Khan's medical records. Fine, Ratchet relented. You can help, but follow my instructions. Exactly. Got it, the human nodded. Ratchet handed the human a suction tool designed to remove leaking energon from inner systems, to give them more visibility on the circuitry, and to save as much of the precious substance as possible. The tool was large in the human's hands, but it was one of the smallest Ratchet had. If you'll have worked with Knockout, I trust you know how it works. The human nodded in response. Good. We need to save as much of Starscream's energon as possible. He lost a lot in his spark chamber, and I need you to help get it out of my way so we can cycle it back into the systems. The human jumped back into Starscream's chest, but thankfully stayed away from the spark, giving Ratchet room to connect the cables to the spark support while the human worked on the energon removal. This was going to be a long surgery. The surgery had taken hours. Danny had lost track of time somewhere between patching energon lines and keeping Starscream's system from completely crashing. His arms trembled as he sat back on the med bath, head leaning against Starscream's frame, utterly spent. The sound of the mech supply felt distant, as if it were underwater. But finally, Starscream was stable. At least now Starscream's spark chamber was all closed up and safe, which seemed to take a little off of Danny's consistent panic and anxiety. It made this whole thing, Starscream's surviving, feel much more real. Danny whipped his brow with the back of his hand, smearing drying energon across his face in the process. His breathing was slow, his body heavy with exhaustion. He glanced over at Ratchet, whose servers were splattered in energon up to his elbows. Danny would have grimaced at the sight if he had enough energy. The glow of the blue fluid shimmered under the light of the medical bay, and Danny's eyes drifted down to his own body. He was coated. Energon stained his clothes, hands, and even his face, drying in parts. He could feel sections of it cracking on his skin, the stiffening of the fabric of his shirt. He had been covered in energon before, but this felt different. This was Starscream's energon that was spilled by Starscream while trying to protect Danny, by lying for Danny. Energon that was spilled because of Danny. You need to get that off. Now. Ratchet's gruff voice snapped through Danny's haze. Then he blinked slowly up at the mech, confused. What? Ratchet gestured wildly with his servers at the energon covering Danny. Energon is toxic to humans. Prolonged exposure can be incredibly dangerous. You need to wash it off immediately. His tone left no room for argument. Then he furrowed his brow, staring up at the mech, as he was slow to process what was being said. He then wiped his hands on his pants like it was no big deal, only resulting in smearing the substance more. Danny made a small frown at the side before looking back up at the medic. I've been working with it for ages. Knockouts even dumped a ton on me before, and I've been fine. Ratchet's expression shifted to horror. You have been what? Danny frowned. Yeah, Knockout never said anything about it being dangerous. Roger shook his helm like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. That's because Knockout doesn't care if you live or die. Roger went to reach for Danny to pick him up, but paused at whatever annoyed expression Danny was able to convey. Energon may not affect you right now, the medic continued, but it's corrosive to your biology in the long term. You need to get it off your skin now. Danny paused, feeling Starscream behind him. The thought of having to move, to leave him alone and vulnerable. It seemed all the doziness snapped out of him at once at the thought. He sat up straight, narrowing his eyes and crossing his arms. I'm not leaving him alone. Not after everything. Roger let out a long sigh, clearly frustrated. Do you honestly think I would spend hours repairing him only to let him die now? I'm a medic, kid. My job is to keep him alive. He gestured towards Starscream's body. And as a medic, I am also responsible for keeping you alive. Roger's right, a deep voice, Optimus spoke up from behind him. Danny jumped in surprise, not having noticed the massive Autobot's presence. His senses were shot, and he was surrounded by enemies. With his friend unconscious, this was not a good predicament to be in. How did he slip by him? Danny instinctively stood up and climbed closer to Starscream. He didn't care if he was being obvious. Your health comes first, the larger mech continued, eyeing Danny carefully. You've been working for Roger for over 6 Earth hours. Really? Felt longer, Danny commented dryly. Optimus didn't seem amused. Danny paused. I don't want to leave him. The mech's optics softened at Danny. He still didn't like that look. It felt like pity. Optimus's tone was calm, almost soothing. I give my word. Starscream will be unharmed when you return. Roger will ensure that he remains stable. Then he felt the urge to snap back, to say something about how he's not trusting these people, his protection obsession working in overdrive. The mere thought of leaving Starscream almost caused Danny's core physical pain. But Danny could feel the energon coating him. Starscream's energon, and he wanted it off. He discovered early on he couldn't phase through the stuff, so the only thing that would work was a shower, or flying at insanely high speeds to burn it off. He didn't have access to the second option right now. They must have realized Danny was contemplating, because they simply waited for his answer. Danny knew if they tried to forcefully take him from Starscream, he would fight back with everything he had. He wouldn't let them, but maybe Roger would protect him. It must be an oath or something to be a medic. Or at least, that's what Roger implied. Though, if that were true, Danny had no idea what the heck Knockout was doing. Danny glanced over at Optimus again, who simply watched and analyzed Danny with concern. Then he shook his head. I will go, but only if Roger is the only one here, no one else. Not unless I'm here with him. Danny stared Optimus down as if daring him to disagree. Roger will watch over Starscream's vitals, and I will leave the medbay until you return, if that is what you wish, Optimus said. Danny's expression switched from threatening to surprised. He honestly thought the mech was going to just disagree instantly, with Danny trying to make rules. Danny could read his field. It was honestly strangely easy to read, and it seemed very genuine, concerned, and honest. He could be faking it, but this guy didn't know Danny could read fields, so there would be no point in doing that. Danny glanced up at Roger with worry, and the mech simply gave a firm nod of agreement. Those optics were still glued on the dying energon on Danny's clothes. Optimus continued. There's a human shower in the back of the silo, near the living quarters. He gestured with his service in that general direction. You will also find spare clothing stored there. Please take care of yourself. Danny hesitated for a moment, but the exhaustion was finally catching up with him. His limbs felt like lead, and the energon dying on his skin itched in a way that was starting to make him uncomfortable. Fine, he muttered reluctantly, moving to climb down from Starscream's berth. Optimus held a service out for Danny, obviously hoping to help Danny down. Then he paused, staring at it for a moment, before stepping on carefully, itself just lowering Danny to the ground like he expected. The mech started walking towards the door. He must have noticed Danny's confused glance up at him because he spoke up. "It's faster this way." He paused, as if debating his own actions. "Though, if you would prefer to walk, I can let you down." Danny thought about it for a moment. "No, it's fine." Optimus smiled down at him. "Very well." It was at that moment that Danny realized that the mech no longer had his battle mask on. Danny tilted his head before glancing one more time at Starscream behind them as they left the med bay. Danny would only be gone for a few minutes, and nothing would happen during that time. Nothing. The doors closed. That was the Podfic. I hope you liked it. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. I have more of those Podfic videos. If you want to commission me for a Podfic reading, more to that is in my channel description. And yeah, that's it. Have a fun rest of your day.